Bioethics will continue the bioethics part from the last session. Will look into ethical aspects of genetically engineered organisms and their release in environment. So the ultimate goal of advances in biotechnology is for the benefit of mankind, either direct or indirect. The modern biotechnology deals with genetic manipulations of viruses, bacteria, plants, animals, fish, and birds. So, the introduction of foreign genes into various organisms raises concerns about the safety, ethics, and unforeseen consequences. Let us see some of the popular phrases used while referring to experiments on recombinant DNA technology. They are manipulation of life, they say playing with God, and man made evolution. These are all the things come to the mind in recombinant DNA technology. The major apprehension of genetic engineering is that through recombinant DNA experiments, unique microorganisms may be developed that would cause epidemics and environmental crises also sometimes. So, due to these fears, the regulatory guidelines for research dealing with DNA manipulations were very stringent in the earlier years. So far, risk assessment studies have failed to demonstrate any hazardous properties acquired by host cells or host organisms due to transfer of DNA. Thus, the fears of genetic manipulations may be unfounded to a large extent. Consequently, there has been some relaxation in the regulatory guidelines for recombinant DNA research. It's now widely accepted that biotechnology is certainly beneficial to humans, but it should not cause problems of safety to people and environment. And also, it should not create unacceptable social, moral, and ethical issues. So, let us see some public fears of biotechnology. Okay. Public fears of biotechnology. Besides some of the risks, social and ethical issues, they can be better understood with special reference to the following. So, for better understanding of some risks, social and ethical issues, uh, some of the following references we study, that is recombinant therapeutic products for human health or human health care. It is fortunate that there is no serious criticism about the use of recombinant products for medical applications. This is because the therapeutic products and strategies are designed to cure diseases, reduce the sufferings, and improve the quality of life. So, further, the products are used under the medical supervision. In general, the recombinant products designed for human healthcare are more readily acceptable by the public. Some examples for that are use of insulin, interferons, tissue plasminogen activator, and various vaccines also. Genetic modifications and food consumption. Next reference point is genetic modifications and food consumption. The overall objectives of genetic modifications with reference to foods are to increase the quality and quantity of existing foods, to produce new products, to improve the financial returns. Each country has its own regulations for introducing foods into the market. For instance, in USA, the Food and Drug Administration, that is FDA, you have heard of, FDA, that regulates the introduction of foods, drugs, pharmaceuticals, and medical devices into the marketplace. Uh, as regards the foods and food ingredients developed by genetic engineering, the FDA believes that no new regulations are needed. The existing regulations for the assessment foods for safety by toxicity, allergenicity, and impurity testing are adequate. If the chemical composition of the existing food is altered by genetic modification, then it should be specified and the new product should be accordingly labeled. Okay. To highlight the public perception of genetically modified foods, some selected examples of food ingredients are and their acceptance or certain controversies related to their use are briefly described now, that is regarding chymosin. Chymosin. Chymosin is milk clotting proteolytic enzyme that hydrolyzes the milk protein. That hydrolyzes the specific protein, that is milk protein casein, to produce curd, which in turn is processed into cheese. Okay. Traditionally, chymosin is derived from the stomach of calves in the form of rennet. By genetic engineering techniques, the chymosin gene was cloned and expressed in E. coli. This resulted in a large scale and cost effective production of chymosin. The chemical composition, structure, and biological activity of recombinant chymosin were identical to the chymosin of rennet. Then FDA gave license to chymosin for its commercial use, and it is now widely used in cheese making. Another one is bovine somatotropin. It's also called as bovine growth hormone, BST. Uh, when BST, when injected to dairy cattle, increases the milk production significantly. So, by recombinant DNA technology, the gene for BST was cloned and expressed in E. coli. Okay. Then the recombinant BST is so produced that when injected to cows was found to increase milk production by about 20 to 25%. Okay. So, we'll see the effect of recombinant BST on animals and consumers now. Effect of recombinant BST on animals. Administration of recombinant BST can produce localized swelling at the site of injection on animals. Okay, swelling will appear after the injection. There may be some other adverse effects like increased susceptibility to infection and decreased reproductive capability also. Okay, these are the effects on animals. Then effects of recombinant BST on human health. So, what will be the effects on human health means um, the natural BST or even recombinant BST increases the body levels of insulin like growth factor 1, that is IGF 1, which in turn enhances the milk production. there is evidence that IGF-1 stimulates growth of cancer cells also, cancer cells. So this causes concern among the consumers of milk produced by using recombinant BST. Okay. Recombinant BST was licensed in USA, but for use in dairy cattle in 1994. But in some countries, in fact, have banned the use of recombinant BST because there are some people who believe that, particularly some scientists also, who believe that the cry raised against recombinant BST is more due to economic and political reasons. It is feared that by recombinant BST use, by the usage of recombinant BST, the dairy industry may be controlled by large industrial groups. Okay, because the recombinant technology is not cost effective, poor people cannot reach it. So the dairy industry may be controlled by large industrial groups, and the small dairy farms may become unprofitable or they may suffer due to the product. So recombinant BST story is an interesting illustration of the problems surrounding the use of recombinant products, that is genetic engineering. So other references, that is genetic testing and screening. Genetic testing and screening techniques are now available for parent prenatal testing, okay, to specifically detect whether a fetus carries genetic defects. This will help the parents to be better prepared for the future baby. The negative aspects of this prenatal testing is the couple may opt for abortion even for a minor genetic defect, or sometimes for gender bias also it may happen. Okay. Next we have human gene therapy. Uh, Theoretically, correction of genetic defects is possible by gene therapy. The present status of human gene therapy is, from the ethical perspective, gene therapy involving introduction of genes into a patient, that is comparable to the practice of transplantation of organs such as heart, liver, lungs, etc. So therefore there is not much controversy over gene therapy as long as it is intended to be used to reduce the serious medical disorders. It will help the serious medical disorders. However, the gene therapy must be under a close supervision to satisfy medical, legal, ethical, and safety implications, beside addressing the public concerns also. Then we have human embryonic stem cell culture, stem cell research. So we say ESC, embryonic stem cell. Embryonic stem cell lines were established in 1998. These cells are capable of giving rise to any human cell type, you know already. So embryonic stem cell lines open the possibilities of treating diseases with cell therapy, basically. So disorders that involve the loss of normal cells, such as diabetes, diabetes mellitus, that Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease. So these diseases could perhaps be corrected with cell therapy, right? And it may take more time. There are many ethical and legal issues involved in embryonic stem cell research. Several objections also raised by the public. US federal government in fact has banned the use of federal funds for human embryo research for over 20 years already. At present, most of the research related to embryonic stem cells are being supported by private companies. Next we have human cloning, or cloning in humans. After the cloning of the sheep Dolly in 1997, some groups of researchers naturally became interested to explore the possibilities of cloning humans. The very thought of human cloning has become a highly charged and controversial issue. Okay, as such, considering the biomedical ethics, most of the countries have banned research related to human cloning. It cannot be predicted at present whether someday human cloning may become inevitable also. Scientists Scientists who were awarded Britain's first license for human cloning have recently, that is in 2005, created an early stage of human cloned embryo by using nuclear transfer. The researchers, as such, they are not interested to make babies by cloning. Okay, instead they wish to create test tube embryos to supply stem cells that can give rise to every tissue in the body. So, by this approach, it might be possible one day to repair tissue damages and to cure many diseases also. Example, your Parkinson's disease and diabetes mellitus. There you can see the tissue loss in the body. Recombinant foods and some religious beliefs related to it. Some of the ethical concerns of use of recombinant foods are related to religious beliefs. Besides food habits, so transfer of pig genes into sheep, okay, may offend the sentiments of Muslims and Jews. So these religion people, they have some beliefs. According to their religious beliefs, um, that genes from the pigs which are introduced into sheep, that may offend their sentiments. Okay. uh, Next is introduction of animal genes into food plants. Okay, they it may invite opposition by strict vegetarians. They may offend the animal genes in uh, plants. Okay, transfer of human genes to food animals may be unacceptable to some people. Okay, then feeding of human gene. Human gene containing organisms to animals sounds in a bad taste. That is, at present, the genetically modified yeast that produce recombinant proteins after their use are fed to animals. The religious groups in general are selective about the foods to be eaten, right? So, however, they are not so rigid when it comes to the use of medical medically derived products. For instance, Muslims and Jews may accept pig derived insulin for use in diabetic patients, but they cannot accept it in day to day food intake. This is due to the fact that all religious faiths consider human life is the most valuable and its preservation is the first priority. Further, the general belief is that the human body is violated only by oral consumption and not by injection or surgical interventions. This is also there. Eating genes every day. You have to question yourselves that every day we eat plants and animals and various products which are derived from those plants and animals. Beside a large number of bacteria, in other words, we can say we regularly consume DNA, that is genetic material, organized into genes in various organisms, right? So far, no one has attempted to categorize genes as vegetarian or non-vegetarian, right? So in day-to-day life, we'll be eating genes. We don't know they are vegetarian or non-vegetarian, correct? So ethical aspects, will move on to ethical aspects of genetically modified organisms, that is GMOs, and their release in environment. Some of the ethical aspects or ethical issues are, most of the genetically modified organisms are used as models in laboratory researchers to study the function of specific genes. However, there are a lot of ethical issues related to genetically modified organisms. Okay, we'll see some of the major ethical aspects related to GMOs. The genetically modified organisms introduced into the ecosystem could have unpredictable results. Okay, so they may cause any serious damages to the ecosystem that will, we don't know, we can't predict it. And claiming the patent rights is another problem that has cropped up for the genetically modified organisms, which are created for meeting food and medical requirements. Okay, so next is biopiracy. Biopiracy would severely affect the biodiversity of concerned areas, and it may harm the indigenous livelihoods. So what is biopiracy? See, I'll take an example. There are 27 varieties of basmati rice which are cultivated in India. Okay, this variety is known for its unique flavor and long grains. An American company crossbred their semi-dwarf varieties with the Indian basmati, and they claimed it to be a new variety. The company even got the patent rights for the new variety without giving any compensation to the country, our country farmers. So this will be the loss for our farmers. This is known as biopiracy. Okay, this would severely affect the biodiversity of the concerned areas, and it may harm the livelihoods of them. The developing and the underdeveloped parts of the world, um, like India, Africa, etc., they have traditional knowledge of their bioresources. Okay. On the contrast, the industrially developed nations have, they have poor biodiversity. Hence, the laws should be made by the developing nations to prevent these kinds of exploitation of their resources. Got it? And an initiative was taken by the government in this aspect by setting up the GEAC, that is Genetic Engineering Approval Committee, under the Environment Protection Act in 1986. This body makes this body makes laws and rules for the creation, use, import and export, and also storage of genetically modified organisms. Release of genetically engineered organisms into environment. The release of GMOs GMOs are also called as genetically engineered organisms or genetically modified organisms, both we can say. The release of them into the environment has been a controversial issue. I'm being saying that, and continues to be so. It is feared that the release of GMOs into the environment could have far-reaching consequences. It may lead to the lasting consequences. This is due to the fact that the living GMOs will proliferate. Correct. So they may proliferate, persist, and they will obviously disperse, and sometimes they may transfer their DNA into other organisms also. Okay. So it is further feared that there may be existence or possibility of genetically modified organisms to displace the existing organisms by creating new species. This may lead to severe environmental damage. I have stated the reasons already. So, the regulatory authorizers are very careful in permitting the field trials of genetically modified organisms. Okay, they'll keep this thing in mind that they may displace the existing organisms by creating new species. They are very careful in permitting the field trials of the genetically modified organisms. Further, the release of GMOs into the environment has to be carefully monitored. If they are got through the permissions, also then also the release of them should be carefully monitored and recorded about the effects of it on ecosystem. Release of transgenic animals. Transgenic animals transgenic animals have not posed big problems as the transgenic plants. Okay, because the animals can be much easily identified and contained. But in case of plants where pollination is difficult to control, it's not easy to identify and contain the transgenic plants. But in animals, since we know the copulations in animals, that is mating and all, animals can be identified and contained as the copulation in animals can be done as desired. A majority of transgenic animals are used for medical purposes actually, hence they are genetically appreciated. But the major problem for transgenic animals comes from bioethicists such as animal activists. Many people and also some governments are suspicious of the use of genetically engineered organisms due to various risks and reasons, social beliefs, and some economic concerns also. Thank you.